to claim that it would cost too much to set up a public auto insurance system. Never mind the fact that the information is on the record that it costs the public auto insurances precisely nothing to set it up. Because like any other business, it's set up with a repayable loan, a loan that's repaid with interest, and the rest is amortized over the first few years of the business's operations. That's how the public insurance corporations in Canada were set up, and the total cost to the public purse of setting up those systems is and was zero. And yet the other parties persist in standing up and claiming that some other figure is true. Why do they do this, Mr. Speaker? What are they afraid of? The other parties persist in saying that the public auto insurers in Canada lose money and that it has to be picked up by the public treasury. It is not true, Mr. Speaker, so why do they keep on saying it? They have access to the same data that we do. So why do they keep saying these things? In the whole history of public auto insurance in Canada, the public treasury has been called on exactly once, in British Columbia 28 years ago, by a social credit government I certainly won't answer for. And everybody agrees that they shouldn't have done it, they didn't need to do it, and the money was repaid quickly and with interest. And yet the other parties still stand up and say that the public treasury is at risk. Never mind that that's the only time in Canada's history that the public treasury has been called on by a public auto insurer. Why do they keep saying these things when they have access to the same information that we do? Mr. Speaker, in fact, the truth about the system in British Columbia is that it subsidizes the government. And the other parties have access to the same information that we do. So why do they keep suggesting that the opposite is true? The equivalent here, Mr. Speaker, would be that if the entire operation of the Registry of Motor Vehicles were paid for by the private auto insurance industry, because that's what happens in British Columbia. ICBC, the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, pays for the entire motor vehicle registry operation out of its pocket. And it has begged the provincial government to be allowed off the hook because it wants to fight the private insurers on a level playing field. Because let's not forget that for the optional coverage, there's full competition in British Columbia, in which ICBC is just one of many players. They have begged the government to let them off the hook, to let them stop paying for these non-insurance operations, which is what they're called in the financial statement. But so far, the government of British Columbia finds it too tempting to dip into ICBC's pocket to pay for the Registry of Motor Vehicles. So that's the way the money's flowing in British Columbia. It's ICBC is subsidizing the government, not the other way around. So why do the other parties keep saying the opposite? What is it that they're afraid of, Mr. Speaker? Why is it that just because the NDP adopts a position in favor of public auto, that they feel compelled to say the opposite? Because we know that the leaders of all political parties in 4 of Canada's provinces support public auto insurance. We also know that the Liberal leaders of Alberta and New Brunswick support public auto insurance. We also know that the Premier of New Brunswick supports, at the very least, a study, the public hearings that are going on right now, about public auto insurance. So why are Nova Scotia's old-style parties so set in their ways that they utterly reject even considering public auto insurance? And they do so in terms and on the basis of facts which are demonstrably false. Why do they do that? What are they afraid of, Mr. Speaker? So we have a bill before us now. Deals with the symptoms not the real problems. It demonstrates short-term thinking with long-term negative consequences for the people of Nova Scotia. It shows political objectives trumping good public policy and even common sense. A bill that ignores the public input that was received in the law amendments process. A bill based on an analysis by the government that refuses to consider all the options. That's why I say, Mr. Speaker, that this is a bad bill. This is not the answer to the auto insurance crisis in Nova Scotia. We will be back dealing with this issue 6 months from now, a year from now, who knows? But we will be back. This kind of reform has not worked in New Brunswick, and it will not work here. The insurance companies and the insurance brokers have told this House in detail in the law amendments process, this bill will not work. And they explained in detail with practical examples of why it will not work. And still, the Conservatives and their Liberal allies charge ahead. Now, I can't resist saying, Mr. Speaker, that I find it more than a little amusing, the Liberal attitude towards this bill. Because on the one hand, they seem to want to distance themselves from it, saying, as the member for Richmond said again today, it's a government bill, it's not our bill. But at the same time, the member for Richmond talks about an item that appeared in yesterday's Halifax Daily News, which says it was the direct intervention of the Liberal leader that led to the agreement between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Apparently, the Liberal leader wants to take credit for his intervention. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? For the first few days and few weeks, maybe even the first few months, the Liberal leader will bask in the glow of people saying, well, maybe you've solved the auto insurance problem in Nova Scotia. But 6 months or a year from now, when things have fallen apart, as they will, I wonder if he's going to stand up and be counted for taking the blame, for being one of the sponsors of such an extraordinarily bad bill. So, Mr. Speaker, with those remarks, I take my place knowing that we'll be back, knowing that this issue has not been solved, knowing that there is a better way, but it's going to take an NDP government to do it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I intended to rise in my place today and speak briefly about the bill that's before the House for third reading, and I do intend to be relatively brief. I did, however, have the opportunity to listen to the member from Halifax Fairview and his comments with respect to public auto insurance once again. And as the Leader of the Opposition would know, he and I have been down this road many times before, talking about the dichotomy, and this is the closing of a door, as it were, with respect to auto insurance in Nova Scotia. And we certainly consider it to be the best of a bad situation that resulted in cooperation between us and the other side, the government members. This is the result overall of cooperation. This is the result of doing our best to hold the government to its word with respect to what was promised in the first place with respect to this piece of legislation. Back during the election campaign, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives running for election said that they would put a cap on minor injuries and provide a 20% reduction. What we held them to was the commitment that a minor injury was indeed, Mr. Speaker, a minor injury. And what we also said clearly was that in order for this legislation to avoid the chaos that has happened in New Brunswick, we needed a legislated reduction in insurance rates across the board. I'm pleased to see that the government has listened to both of those comments that we've put forward. I find it cannot pass without comment that, at least for the part of the member from Fairview's, Halifax Fairview's comments that I heard, he made the remark that the bill is the same as if nobody came forward to law amendments. And Mr. Speaker, in fairness to the government members who sat on law amendments, and in fairness to the Liberal members who sat on law amendments, I would suggest that that is terribly unfair, not just to the members who sat and ultimately made for a better bill, but for the people of Nova Scotia who appeared before that committee and said that we can do better than this. And this bill is clearly better than what was there before, and it is the result of cooperation between the two parties. As I understand, the member from Richmond has said this is a government piece of legislation, and it is something that they have spearheaded. It is something that in principle we have agreed with respect to this bill, but it's not in detail what the Liberals would have brought forth in the circumstances. We certainly said that in order to get a 15% reduction, we would only require a cap on soft tissue injuries. I would, however, take exception to a number of things that have been said with the greatest respect by the member from Halifax Fairview. To suggest that this bill is the same when one looks at the definition is, I think, in the circumstances, not fair to a fair reading of what's been put before this House. First of all, with respect to the definition, I note with some interest that the member from Halifax Fairview casts aspersions on new language being used and almost seemed to commend the definitions that existed in New Brunswick and Ontario, when he knows, I would expect fully well, that the definitions in Ontario and New Brunswick are ones that have been considered by people who share his views to be considerably draconian. And they apply a cap on people's personal liberties that this Liberal Party finds unacceptable. And I find it rather interesting that he continues to refer to the provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba favorably with respect not only to rates, which I think, in fairness to the position that has been taken by the NDP, is an arguable point, but clearly we're talking about apples and oranges when we compare these two systems. And you need look no further than the compensation caps that are put on in Saskatchewan and Manitoba to consider that the member from Halifax Fairview is trying to have it both ways in this situation. You clearly, if you're referring to the virtues of Manitoba and Saskatchewan, you first have to identify that significant caps exist in those regimes on people's personal liberties. And you can't stand in this House and say to the people, it almost seemed bizarre for him to be suggesting, on the one hand, it's too bad we didn't adopt a definition that was well accepted in places like Ontario. And why didn't we go to a place which kept people's liberty interests? And why didn't we consider more the wonderful options that exist in places like Saskatchewan and Manitoba, when anyone who understands the Saskatchewan and Manitoba model will recognize that they, in fact, apply significant caps on people's awards at the end of the day. To make, I won't go through the long discussion about what he has said concerning the cost of startup. But I found it rather amusing that he said, unless, and I could be corrected, but if my ears weren't deceiving me, the member from Halifax Fairview said it would cost now nothing to start up a public, and I see the Leader of the Opposition now nodding that it would cost nothing. I would remind the Leader of the Opposition and the member from Halifax Fairview that it was they who said that, in fact, it would cost $2 million, the same amount of money that it would cost to set up 2 Tim Hortons franchises in Halifax. Now we have an indication from Mr. Jordan, although he doesn't commit himself to this language. He says that he's heard that it would cost, I think it's in the range of $14 to $16 million to start up. We also have the Premier's task force that says that the total cost would be approximately $100 million. These are significant costs that need to be taken into consideration. It's not just the actual cost of starting this up, but it's the lost revenue that results from moving away from a private enterprise system in these circumstances. So in all of these circumstances, I think it's important that we provide a comparison of apples to apples. This bill has been improved. It's by no means perfect. We are clearly suggesting that the definition has been improved, and for the member from Halifax Fairview to say that nobody was listening to the people who came forward in law amendments, it's just not so. The definition has been substantially enhanced in a number of ways. First of all, the definition is in the Act and it's not in regulations, which I would suggest makes it more malleable in future dates for the opportunity for people to lobby and have it changed at some later date. We also have the situation where we specifically reference particular injuries that are explicitly stated to be not minor injuries in the circumstances, and we also have the reference to the 12 months, something resolving itself in 12 months, which certainly is a significant concession to the plaintiffs in Nova Scotia, and I think it's being recognized as that. But for those homemakers and housewives, Mr. Speaker, who wanted this bill improved to ensure that the benefits that would have otherwise flowed to them, clearly substantial improvements from the initial bill have been made. For those people who saw their sick leave benefits being taken away, there are improvements there. For all of those people who are in Facilities Association and wouldn't have received a 20% reduction, again, they received the 20% reduction. There is a commitment to review the discount rate in 12 months and to be reviewed on a regular basis. And the Insurance Review Board is also going to be looking into other types of insurance, which we consider to be a step in the right direction. I recognize that the NDP also supported that as a move. The challenges with respect to other types of insurance are growing, and I think that it must be a priority of this government to get on top of that issue at the earliest possible opportunity. The Liberal Party is committed to the minority situation that we find ourselves in, Mr. Speaker. We want to make these circumstances better. When three parties set out during the summer election to get a mandate from Nova Scotians exclusively for themselves, what they ended up with on August 5th was a mandate from the people to work together. The mandate for us is to make sure that Nova Scotians get, in the end, a better government, a government that is responsive to their needs. Everyone recognizes that we need a reduction in auto insurance rates in this province, and the Liberal Party is committed to that. Auto insurance rates have been unacceptably high, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, what we've seen is that they have risen at a rate that Nova Scotians are simply unprepared to accept. What we have before you is a bill that I hope and expect will lead to a better day for drivers in Nova Scotia, but will also provide for a reasonable balance and compensation for people who have been injured as a result of automobile accidents. I would point out, when we speak about a cap on compensation that people receive for automobile accident injuries, that most Canadians, Mr. Speaker, when you consider just the provinces of Quebec and Ontario alone, which has the majority of the population of this country, most Canadian drivers operate under some system where there is a cap on certain types of injuries. We are not reinventing the wheel here in Nova Scotia. What we are providing for is a balance. And we need to recognize that one independent authority came forward to examine this issue. It was the Utilities and Review Board for Nova Scotia, and they were asked the question about whether or not, for example, as the NDP suggests, that this is a problem with the operator. And the clear and square answer that was given to us by an independent body, a trier of fact, having heard evidence and having heard representations from the NDP, was that it's not, in fact, the operator. It is the intensity of certain types of claims, particularly soft tissue claims. So, Mr. Speaker, we have responded to the challenges that have been put before us before the URB. I find it to be of some interest that in the early going, before the URB brought down its decision, the members of the official opposition were suggesting that the insurance companies were gouging Nova Scotians. And I hear the Leader of the Opposition saying, indeed, today, that they are. But wasn't it the same party who, on a number of occasions over the last couple of weeks, have said that it's mathematically impossible for us to cap rates and still provide a fair balance of compensation? Well, those two things, I would suggest to the NDP, can't be reconciled. Either they're gouging or there's no mathematical possibility for us to make this work. So I think in the circumstances, Mr. Speaker, that this is an approach that makes the best of this situation. We're not going to forecast into the future that this is going to be perfect forever and a day, because the Liberal Party would have come forward with something that's different. But we recognize that in our responsibility to make this bill a better bill, we have succeeded. We have responded to the call from Nova Scotians not to make the mistake that was made in New Brunswick by allowing the insurance companies on their own goodwill to roll back insurance rates, which has not happened. And no wonder the leader of the Liberal Party in New Brunswick is doing that, because it's chaotic there. And we have asked for this definition. We have asked for this definition to clearly state that people would be fairly compensated. Though in those circumstances, Mr. Speaker, we have provided a balance that this party has not been able to provide with the NDP. They have trucked out certainly the Premier of Manitoba on various occasions, who I think, if one were to look back, appeared to have lost an election as a result of his failure to keep control of an insurance issue. And then one would look at the Premier of Ontario under an NDP government who ran on the promise of public insurance, but then once he got into office, he recognized that this wasn't a workable solution. It's part of the ideology of the official opposition, and the only jurisdiction in the Western world that they can point to support the strength of their potential position is the one in British Columbia. There isn't a single state in the United States that does what the NDP is promising. There isn't a single province in Nova Scotia that has been doing it. And we recognize that we have a workers' compensation scheme. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that we have a workers' compensation scheme that is comparable to what's being proposed by the NDP, but I would recognize all the discontent, as the NDP would recognize, with the workers' compensation scheme as it presently exists in Nova Scotia, where we pay the second highest premiums and the lowest payouts. So, are we going to repeat those mistakes? I would suggest in the circumstances not. Our responsibility, Mr. Speaker, is to work in the best interests of Nova Scotians, and that's exactly what we intend to do as we move forward in this minority situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank all members of the opposition who have contributed to the debate on Bill number 1, and also who have participated in the ongoing saga of high insurance rates, which have been our noose for the last 18 months, 2 years. Mr. Speaker, I don't think anybody has come forward as yet with a perfect solution to high insurance rates. But, Mr. Speaker, I honestly believe that the bill that we have before the House and we're going to pass today, Mr. Speaker, is one that will indeed meet the needs of Nova Scotians at the present time. And if sometime down the way it has to be amended, so be it. But, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Halifax Fairview was commenting about the people who appeared in the Red Chamber on law amendments, and he mentioned that nobody came forward that was in favour of this piece of legislation. Well, Mr. Speaker, that may well be true across at the Red Chamber, but Mr. Speaker, that isn't the world over there. The world that I travelled in this weekend was within my own riding, and I didn't hear anybody complaining about this bill. In fact, they were applauding the fact that something was being done. So, Mr. Speaker, I am very, very pleased to move third reading of Bill number 1, and I trust, Mr. Speaker, that indeed this bill will be answering many of the questions that people have with respect to auto insurance. Thank you.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 1. House ready. Court of vote has been called for. We'll ring the bells until the whips are satisfied that all members in the chamber that wish to vote on Bill number 1. Order, please. Are the whips satisfied? A recorded vote has been called for on bill number 1. Those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Mr. Morse.
Yes.
Mr. Rodney McDonald.
Absent.
Mr. Russell.
Yes.
Mr. Ham.
Yes?
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Muir.
Yes.
Mr. Christie.
Yes.
Mr. Fage.
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac.
Yes.
Ms. Bolivar Getson.
Yes.
Mr. D'Entremont.
We.
Mr. Hurlbert.
Absent.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Mr. Morash.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. DeWolf.
Yes.
Mr. Dukes.
Yes.
Mr. Chisholm.
Yes.
Mr. Langell.
Yes.
Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Chataway.
Yes.
Mr. Parent.
Yes.
Ms. Massey.
No.
Mr. McDonnell.
No.
Mr. Corbett.
No.
Ms. Maureen McDonald. Mr. Dexter.
No.
Mr. DeVoe.
No.
Mr. Manning McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Graham.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Yes.
Ms. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Gadet.
We.
Mr. Glevine.
Yes.
Mr. Colwell. Absent. Mr. H. Dave Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Sampson.
We.
Mr. Steele.
No.
Ms. Moore.
No.
Mr. Parker.
Order, please.
No.
Ms. Raymond.
No.
Mr. Epstein.
Nay.
Mr. Pye.
No.
Mr. Goss.
No.
Mr. David A. Wilson.
No.
Mr. Estabrooks.
Nay.
Mr. Sampson.
Yes.
Mr. Terrio.
Yes.
Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
Those in support of the motion, 33. Those opposed, 14.
Motion is carried.
1, entitle an act to amend the laws respecting automobile insurance.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honorable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Yeah, sorry. The Honorable Leader of the Official Opposition on introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Joining us today in your gallery is Mr. Mark Atali, and he is the new Consul General of Israel, and he's here in Nova Scotia on his first official visit. He had the opportunity, because of the delay, to join us in the gallery to see the vote. So I would ask all members to welcome Mr. Atali.
Certainly welcome the Consul General to Nova Scotia and to the House Assembly. We hope you enjoy your stay with us, sir. The Honorable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 6, the Public Service Superannuation Act?
Bill number 6. The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise to move third reading of Bill number 6. Mr. Speaker, this is a relatively simple bill. It deals with the question of people attaining the age of 65 and whether it is a right or a privilege for them to be able to continue working. This bill will allow people to make the choice on their own if they wish to stay after 65 and continue working in the civil service. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this bill has had a chance to have some review. This bill is the same as legislation that's another part of the country. So, Mr. Speaker, we indeed are bringing ourselves in line with the other parts of Canada. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I move third reading of this bill.
The Honorable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we well know that this bill is an experiment of some sorts, Mr. Speaker, along the lines of giving some people an advantage to work until they're 67 years of age. We can't accurately forecast what will happen with this bill, Mr. Speaker. We may be very well coming back in the future to revisit this this bill, Mr. Speaker. Retirement. The government says they get 8 to 10 requests a year on this bill, Mr. Speaker. It's a very minimum, very few people that request the work till the age of 65. I think that 67, actually. I'm sorry. I'm just the bill is not. I don't think it's going to hold up too many casual and part-time workers from getting full-time employment in this with such a limited number, Mr. Speaker. So I think that we're okay with this. I just wish that there may be some things that may have to change in the future. So I think we'll let it go. It'll go for now, Mr. Speaker. We may come back to visit in the future if things don't work out right on this bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to just say a few words on behalf of our caucus on Bill number 6. We definitely feel that this is a bill that will extend the right of workers, older workers, to stay on the job if they choose. We realize that it's purely by choice. It presents an opportunity for workers as they reach age 65. So our caucus will be supporting it. We have no objections to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion is, I recognize the honourable Minister of Finance to close debate on Bill number 6. The honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable members for their comments. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I think there's not much more to say. I will just move third reading.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 6. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 6, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 377 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Service Superannuation Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve in the Committee of the Whole House on bills.
Agreed.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 2?
Bill number 2. I recognize the Honourable Member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak a few minutes on title, if I may. I understand there might be some other speakers from other parties. But on behalf of our caucus, I want to take a couple of minutes just on title to say that since this bill has been at law amendments, we think that it has been improved dramatically. There are a lot of changes that have been made to this bill with regard to protection of workers. And our party all along has said that this legislation is not only about Sunday shopping, it's about the protection of workers. And to be clear, and I'll put this on the record on third reading as well, the bill as it was introduced was a bill to amend the Retail Business Uniform Closing Day Act and the Labor Standards Code. And on top of that, if you actually look at the bill and look at the details of the bill, it always covered more than Sunday shopping. I know that some members noted in law amendments that they thought that this was a bill on Sunday shopping. To a great extent, it might be. But there were clauses in this bill, and they are still in this bill, that dealt prior to law amendments with labor standards generally. There is a provision in this bill to increase fines under the Labor Standards Code across the board. There's a provision in this bill with regard to making contracts between employees and employers to provide for a wage less than the minimum wage. There's provisions in this bill around the powers of the tribunal, around the powers of the director of the Labor Standards Division. Mr. Chair, these are provisions that have nothing to do with Sunday shopping. They are general provisions under the bill that were always there, and as a result, our party believed it was an opportunity to also address other parts of the Labor Standards Code, and we believe that the amendments we have made will go a long way to ensuring that we bring, as I've said in the past, bring the Labor Standards Code into the 20th century, something that has been long overdue. After 30 years of legislation that has not been addressed, has not had any changes to it. We have created legislation that is not in harmony with other provinces in this country who have more up-to-date, more progressive, and more flexible legislation, and one that works for employers and employees. And we think that this can work with regard to this legislation as well, whether it be minimum wage advisory council that will ensure that we depoliticize the process, to ensure that both employers and employees will work together to come to a conclusion each year as to what their recommendation on the minimum wage is, whether it's parental leave that will ensure that workers, particularly female workers, but workers generally, will have the right to be able to take a day off when they have a child who's sick or they have a parent who has a doctor's appointment that they must take them to, an elderly parent. Mr. Chair, those provisions are pretty progressive. Only Quebec in this country, I think, has those currently. There are others as well, whether it's overtime at regular wage versus the standard prior to this bill of minimum wage, whether it is more vacation time, whether it is stronger powers for labor standards officers to be able to go out and actually enforce Sunday shopping and the right of people to refuse to work on Sundays. All of these will make this legislation much stronger. We said from the beginning our party did not take a position strongly in favor or against Sunday shopping, but we wanted to ensure that workers were protected. We believe this legislation now does that, and we look forward to the debate in Committee of the Whole and third reading, and hopefully if this passes as is, we look forward to a strengthened labor standards code that will help workers across this province. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an interesting time for us to come before the House and speak about Sunday shopping because, as many of us know, Sunday shopping has been around as an issue for Nova Scotians for a long period of time. 20 years ago, when I was managing one of the shopping centres in town, I recall specifically attending numerous Chamber of Board of Trade at the time meetings when this was a matter of hot discussion, and it was certainly something of great interest to Nova Scotians and the people in the Halifax area and throughout Nova Scotia for all of this time. I would like to congratulate the many Nova Scotians who have kept this issue alive for this period of time. Back a number of years ago, certainly not 5 years ago, there was an indication that this was an issue that was not going to be revisited for some period of time. But certainly starting in 2002 and continuing through to the present day, the discussion about Sunday shopping simply hasn't been something that has died, and it's because Nova Scotians who feel that we as a province need to step into an age with the other provinces and states in North America to allow people to have choice with respect to shopping 7 days a week. They should be given that ultimate opportunity. And I'd like, frankly, Mr. Chair, to congratulate the members of our caucus for continuing to keep this issue alive. I'm sure that it wouldn't be a far reach to suggest that if it weren't for the diligence of the members of our caucus over the last year and a half, certainly since we've held this position strongly, this matter might not be before the House today. I would, in terms of recognizing the substance of the bill and the improvements in the bill, say a few things. First, I think and we think that the improvements made with respect to vacation time to time and a half, the minimum wage review committee, the unpaid parental leave, and the reinstatement provisions for the director under the Labor Standards Code are all generally steps in the right direction. We feel, however, that if we are to move substantive changes in a minority government situation to bills that were not forecast for the public, then we should find some opportunity for the public to be invited into law amendments to provide their input. So I would like to echo what has been said in the past about the need for the public perhaps to be consulted on those occasions when we are trading in order to ensure that we improve legislation, that we not go so far, particularly in law amendments, that we make changes that are significant to Nova Scotians, that are potentially contentious, without providing an opportunity for Nova Scotians to be consulted. So I would echo our comments previously about the need for consultation around some of these changes, recognizing that these are things that we support. We put before the Law Amendments Committee further changes to protect and support workers. One of the ones that I think is particularly significant is the one that would have provided, and it was ultimately voted down, the one that would have provided workers with a 30-minute break for every 5 hours that they work. This is a provision that is provided in most jurisdictions, and in Nova Scotia, unfortunately, it's not, and it will continue to be for some period of time. So I would suggest this to the House and to my honourable colleagues, that we engage in a process where we actually review the Labour Standards Code more substantively, that we provide some opportunity through the Human Resources Committee, perhaps, or through some other mechanism, to bring back to this House in the spring setting for this House session recommendations on how we can continue to improve labor standards provisions in Nova Scotia. And if we do that, I would suggest that we reach out to Nova Scotians and invite them into our deliberations about this, because there are many good ideas and many of them are opposed to each other. This is an opportunity for us to improve labor standards in Nova Scotia, but we can't pretend that we are acting entirely alone. I would, Mr. Chair, want to speak to two specific issues that were not adopted in law amendments that I think are actually directly related to Sunday shopping and should have been, in fairness, provisions that were adopted by the members of law amendments. And my hope still is that in the Committee of the Whole House, we would have an opportunity for us to revisit these issues. The first has to do with the number of consecutive hours that somebody should be off work before they have to return. Under the present Labour Standards Code, somebody can be required to return to work after just 24 hours of being off, which means for example, single parents who finish their work on a Saturday evening, that they could be required to work again on a Sunday evening. Isn't it fairer for those people to have until Monday morning instead of being required to return to work on Sunday evening? Wouldn't it have been fairer for us to amend the Labour Standards Code directly related to Sunday shopping to provide for workers the opportunity to be off for 36 consecutive hours? That, I think, strikes a reasonable balance. And frankly, of the amendments to the Labour Standards Code, I would suggest, Mr. Chair, it is the one that is most directly related to the Sunday shopping question in the first place. It's a bit of an anomaly that it did not ultimately come forward and be accepted. I know that Mr. DeVoe, the member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, has suggested in the past that, in fact, this is an issue that should have been visited. I think the number of hours that were being suggested by him at that time was something that was different from our 36-hour suggestion, but nonetheless, as a compromise position, the 36 hours, I would suggest, is something that still members of this House would find palatable. It is in the best interests of Nova Scotia workers. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the issue that I think requires still further consideration is the one with respect to when we provide for a trial period for Sunday shopping. What we presently have under this legislation is a trial period that lasts for the 6 weeks leading up to Christmas. And while we accept that this gives Nova Scotians some kind of a feel for what Sunday shopping is all about, it doesn't give them a feel for Sunday shopping for all of the months of the year. Would it not be more reasonable, particularly for the people in the tourism industry who speak so loudly about the need for us to have Sunday shopping, to have a trial period of Sunday shopping for the period stretching across the tourism season? What we specifically suggest is that for the period between May and September, that there should be a trial period for Sunday shopping that gives Nova Scotians an opportunity to see exactly what it is that they're voting for or against when they go to the plebiscite 1 year from now. It provides a fair opportunity, and in some respects, frankly, it is a gain in keeping with this theme of consultation and giving Nova Scotians a full opportunity to vote for something that they completely understand. The 6, as we all know, the 6 weeks, and particularly the 3 or 4 weeks before Christmas, are not like the 6 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks of much of the rest of the year. And for us to understand what we're getting into, surely it is sensible and reasonable for us to give Nova Scotians an opportunity to have the choice to shop on Sundays during the summer months of the year 2004. That's a reasonable and balanced proposal. It's one that we hope the committee will accept as we move forward with our recommendations on how to improve this. Overall, Mr. Chair, I will indicate that the Liberal caucus ultimately feels that the amendments that have been made to this act are ones that improve the bill, that recognize that for too long we haven't identified labor standards issues, but again, the issue of consultation and whether or not we should have continued the process so that particularly small businesses could come in and provide their comments was allowed for. So in all the circumstances, this is a step forward, albeit a small step forward for the people who want choice. We are, as I've said many times, the only jurisdiction in North America without some form of Sunday shopping. We will take the step forward as it exists. We are suggesting squarely that it could be improved, and it still could be improved by this House if we allowed for a period of 36 consecutive hours before somebody is obliged to return to work, and if we allowed for a trial period that stretches between the months of May and September in the year 2004. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my comments.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to make a few brief comments on Bill number 2, following on the comments made by our leader. And I wanted to respond to some of the comments made by the House Leader for the NDP, the Mayor from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage. And it was interesting that in his remarks that he admitted that a number of the changes made to the Labour Standards Code had absolutely nothing to do with the issue of Sunday shopping. That was our argument on Friday. We see in the newspapers over the weekend emails to different members of the House today where business groups are now sitting down and trying to assess the impact of the changes made to the Labour Standards Code in Bill number 2. You know, Mr. Chair, you're not supposed, that's, you know, the process is not set up that you start assessing the changes made to a bill after law amendments, which are changes that had absolutely nothing to do with the bill. We're supposed to be able to allow Nova Scotians, once a bill is tabled, to then see what the impact of that legislation is going to be. Even after law amendments, you know, that they would have, even after second reading, I should say, where they have an opportunity to hear more debate on the bill, then they're given the opportunity to come before us at law amendments to say, here's what the bill's all about. Here's what impact it's going to have. Come and provide comments. That was denied here, Mr. Chair, which was the argument we made Friday, and I think the NDP know deep down that we're right when we say that both workers, employers, and business groups were denied the opportunity to properly comment on the changes made in this bill, because the changes were made in the back door. But what's most interesting, and you know, I certainly tried to temper my comments earlier on Bill number 1, but it was so interesting. It's ironic that while we were listening here on Thursday, the Mayor from Halifax Fairview just chastising us and chastising the government for having sold out and not stuck to what we said we wanted in insurance, and how what we had at the end was not what we had asked for, and continually criticizing us and lecturing the House, while the whole time his party, which I have to assume he was aware of it, maybe he wasn't, maybe they don't talk to each other, not sure, but the whole time his own party was striking a deal with the Tories for a watered-down version on almost everything they asked for. Which is why Friday I took Bill 57, a bill that had been tabled in this House by the leader of the NDP, changes to the Labour Standards Code. And almost every single amendment made to Bill number 2, Sunday shopping, the amendments the NDP wanted, Labour Standards Code, were watered-down versions of what they wanted in Bill 57. Almost every clause was a watered-down version. And yet, we were getting lectured about that we didn't stick to originally what we had said we wanted, whereas we were dealing with insurance, whereas they managed to make changes to Labour Standards Code, which the House Leader of the NDP has even admitted had nothing to do with Sunday shopping. At the end of the day, as our leader has said, the opportunity to have an open and full debate about Labour standards and possible changes, further changes to it, has now been lost. Because instead, the NDP struck a deal with the Tories to deny Nova Scotians the opportunity to choose on Sundays whether they wish to shop, and then to get watered-down versions of what they themselves wanted. I'll give you a few examples. Sick leave. Unpaid sick leave, they got 3 days. They wanted 5. Parental leave, sick leave, whatever you want to call it. They asked for 5, they got 3. That's what they agreed to. Now, well, excuse me, it's parental leave. And one of the clauses if a child is sick. So, pardon me for saying it might be for sick leave. So I'm sure the leader of the NDP is, very quick to correct me on that for such an absurd mistake on my part. But, back to the bill, Mr. Chair. They asked for a number of changes to the weeks as to how many weeks vacation you could get. They had a whole structured version of it in Bill 57. That disappeared. They suddenly said 8 years, you get 3 weeks vacation. That doesn't mean that much, when someone says you get 3 weeks, well, that's fine. What about a business who has 150 employees, that 90% of their employees have more than 10 years, and now they're being told they have to give an extra week's vacation to all of their employees? What impact is that going to have? Well, I don't know. But I think they should have at least been given the opportunity to come here and comment on that. Yet the way this deal was done, they've been denied that opportunity, which is why we're now getting emails from them saying, hold on now, why did you make all these changes to labor standards when the issue was Sunday shopping? And at first the NDP said no, and even the government said, this bill did deal with labor standards, so the changes here can be justified. But the NDP, the House leader, stands in his place and says, we got changes labor standards that had absolutely nothing to do with Sunday shopping. Mr. Chair, it has even been suggested that as procedure, there is more than likely a legitimate argument to argue that this bill should not be permitted to go forward because it has been so substantially altered from its original intent. That's how the serious changes have been made here. Then the NDP and the government say, well, the Liberals didn't vote against it, so it's got to be good. That's not the issue. The issue is how it was done. The NDP have been a party that always said we want consultation. Workers' compensation, we want the meetings to be public meetings. We don't want anything done in the back where the public doesn't have the opportunity to see what's going on. And yet, here's what they've done with labor standards. They've gone in there, accepted watered-down versions of what they wanted, cherry-picked what they wanted. For example, in Bill 57, they asked for part-time benefits. They asked for benefits for part-time employees. Where did that go? I think that's a serious issue. Here in the Strait area, there's been a lot of discussion about that and the concerns about people working part-time for years and years and have no benefits at the end of the day. Yet all of a sudden, that opportunity is now lost. The chances now of seeing this government have any bill that's got the word labor standards in it, I think, Mr. Chair, we will not see that during the life of this minority government, because they've seen what happens if they use the word labor standards. Rather than us, as our leader said, set up an opportunity that we could have an open discussion on it. A number of these changes, we had changes and we are going to propose those here again today, because I'm hoping that at least the NDP, who claim to be a better deal for today's families, regardless of whatever deal they made with the Tories, will recognize that the changes we are asking for are changes that are in the best interest of Nova Scotia working families, especially those who will be impacted by Sunday shopping and by possibly having to work 7 days a week. And I hope that upon reflection that they will take a second look at this and certainly not vote them down as quickly as they voted them down on Friday. As our leader has said, our next amendment will be to have a longer trial period. We've done the 6 weeks before Christmas before. Nova Scotians have said they want to see more. We've heard the tourism industry say we want to see it in the summer. Let's see what impact it's going to have. That's your busiest time. Let's see what it's going to do during that period. So that's more than a reasonable amendment. We now know we're stuck with a plebiscite. Plebiscite Nova Scotians don't want. A plebiscite the UNSM said it doesn't want. A plebiscite the NDP told the UNSM it would not support. Yet they've broken their word to the UNSM. It's on paper. We all have a copy of it. When asked during the election, will the NDP caucus support a plebiscite for Sunday shopping during the next municipal election? The answer was very clear. N-O. No. And yet, now we see what we've had here today. So, clearly, that's once again where they've broken their word. But there's an opportunity here to at least put in changes that actually deal with the bill, deal with the issue of Sunday shopping. They are legitimate amendments. They are reasonable amendments, amendments which we have heard from employers and employees who say, we agree with this. This is not going to have a negative impact. It will have a positive impact on both sides, especially moving from 24 to 36 hours. How the NDP could vote against that is beyond my comprehension, which is clearly something that would benefit Nova Scotia working families that would be impacted by this legislation. So, Mr. Chair, this is a bill where there could have been the opportunity to say, let's allow Nova Scotians to have Sunday shopping, but let's also agree to have a comprehensive review of labour standards here in this province. Let's look at part-time workers. Let's look at whether it's time to bring in benefits. Let's look at vacation overall, not just after 8 years. What if you've worked 20 years? Should it still only be 3 weeks? Let's look at the whole range of issues. Yet, we haven't had an opportunity to do that here in this bill. So I think we've lost on both sides, because Nova Scotians who've spoken very clearly in saying they want the choice of Sunday shopping have been denied that. And on labour standards, the opportunity to have a comprehensive review and more significant changes has also been denied. So on both fronts, I think we have lost here. And it's funny because, member from Halifax Fairview had accused us that after the insurance bill that we would claim this great victory in that, something that no one's done. We said, look, this is a victory for Nova Scotians, victory for minority government. Yet, we've watched the NDP go out and parade what a victory this was for them, for workers, without admitting to workers that in reality it's not even close to what they had asked for, that they had to accept concessions on every one of these amendments, a watered-down version of every one of these amendments. But that's what it all comes down to. That's what it all comes down to for them, because at the end of the day, it's for scoring the political point. If you need examples of that, look no further in Public Accounts Committee. First meeting, member from Halifax, Shabukto, Tories immediately wanted our leader off the committee. And what was their argument? Member from Halifax, Shabukto, we're afraid that the Liberal leader is going to get too much media, and he's going to get too many points in the media, and that our leader won't get it, so we'll be forced to put our leader on the committee so that he can get as much coverage as him. Was it about public policy, the debates? Was it about procedure? Was it about making the committee work better? Was it about getting more information on behalf of Nova Scotians for their best interests? Nothing. It was about who was going to be able to score a point. So when we look at this bill, that's what the NDP are now saying, that they have scored points for Nova Scotia workers. I would say, Mr. Chair, that they've disappointed Nova Scotia workers, because the small gains made here are minute in light of the overall gains that could have been made for workers throughout this province with a full comprehensive review of the Labour Standards Act. I would submit to you, Mr. Chair, that when the House Leader of the NDP says that this brings labour standards in the 20th century, that he is wrong. Because the fact that we're not talking about part-time workers, some who have been working for the same employer for 20 years, then this bill is certainly not bringing labour standards into the 20th century. There are many provisions here that could have impacted Nova Scotia families, that we have lost the opportunity to make those changes. Maybe they'll come again the other day. I'm not going to say never like the member from Halifax Fairview, because there's nothing that's never in this House. But for the time being, we have lost that. So I do not accept when the House Leader of the NDP says this has brought the labour standards codes into the 20th century. It may have brought it closer, but it hasn't brought it there. And let no Nova Scotian be fooled by that, because there are so much other items that we could be dealing with here, that we could have had serious discussion. We could have had Nova Scotians coming into law amendments to provide input, to provide suggestions, most importantly. We've all seen over the years how many times that we've had presenters come into law amendments, which has led to constructive and significant changes to legislation. We sat here, 52 members, thinking we had figured the legislation was at its best, only to go to law amendments and have a presenter come in and give a great idea that no one had thought of, that had led to all of a sudden the committee saying, that's a wonderful idea, let's make that change. It's happened in the past. I've seen it many times over the last 5 years. That's why our system works. and that the law amendments process is a good process for Nova Scotians. But in this case, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked because a deal was made to make sure it did not work. That's where it has fundamentally failed. My fear is that we're starting a precedent here of allowing bills to come in under face value, having the law amendments process go through with Nova Scotians looking at a bill on its face value, only to see that afterwards deals are brokered to significantly not only amend the bill at hand, but other pieces of legislation, which Nova Scotians could not be asked to have reasonably assumed would take place. I would submit to you, Mr. Chair, that if it was clear that the changes that we now have in the bill were going to be made, we would have had more representations from business groups, from employers, even more important, from employees, who would have probably told us, especially the part-time workers, why is there no changes being made for us who've waited so long for benefits? Why is that not on the table? Why are those discussions not taking place? Yet unfortunately in this case, they've been silenced. They've been silenced because of a deal made by the Tories and by the NDP to not allow Nova Scotians that opportunity. Only time will tell what the impact will be of these changes. At the end of the day, is it going to be a great benefit to workers? We don't know. Time will tell that. Overtime being changed from an hour, 1.5 time and a half of minimum wage to now be time and a half regular pay. That sounds like a great idea. I think it probably will be a good idea. But is that going to lead to employers to cut back the hours of their employees and maybe hire more at part-time? Who wins in that situation? We haven't had an opportunity to look at those issues. And by not having an opportunity to look at those issues, I don't think we've been responsible as members of this House. Because we cannot walk out of here and we cannot look at anything in front of us, any report, any presentation, or any study that says that these changes are right for Nova Scotians and that other changes that were looked at were not right for Nova Scotians. And I would challenge any member of the government or of the NDP to stand in their place. And I know the member from Halifax Fairview has been very big on reports and studies and numbers. Well, let them stand their place in this instance and table for us where there has been the reasoned approach to these changes to tell us, and to more importantly tell Nova Scotians, that these changes will be a benefit for employees, for employers, and for the Nova Scotia economy, for Nova Scotians in general. Maybe it will. But that's something that we have to accept without having the concrete facts in front of us. That's where I think this process has gone wrong. Maybe the NDP will want to take shots at us and say that our negotiations with the government, certainly we had negotiations and they were taking place, but Nova Scotians knew what it was about. It was about the definition. It was about insurance. And at the end of the day, the changes made were still about insurance. As I said in my remarks earlier, it wasn't about the Motor Vehicle Act. It wasn't about the Transportation Act. It wasn't about other acts. It was about insurance. About insurance. And the member from Hants East can say all he wants, read the title. His own House Leader has admitted the changes made to the Labour Standards Code, a significant number of them, have nothing to do with Sunday shopping.
It's funny, it does amend the Motor Vehicle Act.
So,
And the limitation.
Mr. Speaker,
It amends 4 different acts.
but it was all about insurance. This is not all about Sunday shopping. The NDP have admitted to that. They use this as an opportunity to work with the Tories, deny Nova Scotians the opportunity Sunday shopping. The NDP had to break their word to the UNSM, which their leader, he hasn't been on the job that long. In his first election, he's already breaking his word to a significant group. And yet, at the end, what have we got? That's what we have to ask ourselves. And by going along this process, are we now creating such an example that the law amendments process may just become irrelevant? And if that's the case, Mr. Chair, I would say that we've done something wrong here. Because Nova Scotians should be proud of the fact that our legislature does allow public input such as what's permitted under law amendments process. It's something for us, to even brag about, be proud of. But when we start subverting that, especially under minority government, because if it was a majority government, we're limited as an opposition as to what we can do. We can't force the government's hand. We can delay. We can, for hours, and we can, hold them here in the House longer. But as for forcing their hand, we can't do that. But in minority, we can. Yet this opportunity was lost because a deal was made that Nova Scotians were not aware of what was contained within it. And as I said, the fact that we stand here today, I checked my email today and I'm receiving emails from employers that are saying, what happened? Where did the changes come from? The bill was about Sunday shopping and about changes to the Labour Standards Code, which were directly related to Sunday shopping. And now all of a sudden, as the NDP House Leader has admitted in his remarks, it's about much more than that. Yet they weren't permitted the opportunity to even comment on it. They weren't permitted the opportunity to say, look, here's what the impact's going to be. Before you make these changes, have you considered this? Mr. Chair, it's the process that is flawed here. The Mayor from Halifax, Fairview, can say all he wants about how we voted for it. It's the process here which is what has been flawed. They know that. They know that. Yet they will not admit that. At least the House Leader in NDP has come out and publicly said, and he just said it today, that the changes they were able to broker with the Tories, many of them had nothing to do with Sunday shopping. I'm sure the Mayor from Halifax Fairview would never admit that, but at least the House Leader in NDP was honest enough with this House to be able to say, we use this as a brokering tool to get changes to the Labour Standards Code that had nothing to do with Sunday shopping. Yet, Mr. Chair, how much more could we have possibly done? That's the opportunity that's been lost here. The Mayor from Halifax Fairview knows that. If he looks at Bill 57, of what they were asking for and what they've received, significantly different. He knows that himself. It's a watered-down version of Bill 57. So they didn't even get what they were asking for. Yet, at the end of the day, what are we left with? Nova Scotians are still denied the right to have Sunday shopping, although the polls clearly show the majority want it. The NDP leader was forced to break his word with the UNSM, where he put down on paper that he would not support a plebiscite to be held during the next municipal election. As I said, the answer is very clear, NO. Yet they've broken that word also. They've denied the opportunity for employers, most importantly employees, to come in and make comment on the Labour Standards Code, make comment on the proposed amendment, and even suggest changes. And number 4, the NDP supported the Tories in denying our amendments to provide for a longer break for Nova Scotia's working families. And on the 5th one, they've also denied our request to have a longer trial period so Nova Scotians would have more experience with Sunday shopping to be able to make a more reasoned decision next municipal election on this issue. So I'm hoping today that, especially with the changes that we have brought forward at law amendments, that with the opportunity of the weekend and with time, the opportunity for sober second thought, that the NDP will look again at the changes we've made. I have no doubt that the government will not support them, but certainly changes being suggested that are in the best interest of Nova Scotia's working families and that are not going to have a significant negative impact on employers is something that this House should consider in a responsible way, and something that we should all be working for to make the changes to this bill. As we've said before, we would have preferred not having a plebiscite. We would have preferred having year-round Sunday shopping. That did not happen because of the deal made between the NDP and the Tories. Now there is some elements of change that can be made to this bill, which I think common sense rules that they are good changes, and that we've already been able to poll some of those affected who have said they would not be opposed to these changes. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will take my place to rise again to bring in the 2 amendments that we have to this particular bill.
Shall Clause 1 carry? No. I recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we've got our First Amendment here. It's page 1, clause 1. And on proposed subsection 3A1, we would add the following. I'll just wait, Mr. Chair, until you have the opportunity to have a look at it and members have an opportunity to look at it.
It would appear that everyone has had an opportunity to review it. The honourable member? The page is presently circulating. Perhaps it would be advisable if the page just pass them to the members that are present. There appears to be one slight drafting error with the member's amendment. Okay, I'll recognize the honourable member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe the member has already made some of these adjustments, but two that I note with regard to whether this amendment is in order. It says that there should be a new clause AA, and my understanding when legally drafting is that you would make it a B and then change the number of B that's currently in the bill to a C. An AA is usually used after you've gone through A to Z, and well, renumber accordingly. And the other is, my understanding as well is that normally these are introduced or some form of legal drafting done by the council, Ledge Council, and usually we see at the bottom some sort of number noting that. Can we clarify whether these have actually been approved for form by Ledge Council or whether these are drafted by the Liberal caucus directly?
No. Yes, that's correct, if memory serves me correctly as well. It's not a requirement that Legislative Council drafts the amendments, although it's generally advisable and sometimes good practice to have Legislative Council at least review them. I believe Legislative Council has conferred with the honourable member for Richmond, so just on some drafting errors. Okay, I'll recognize the honourable member on another point of order.
Thank you. If I can just, as the member from Richmond, I understand he's moving amendments. As he's moving them, can he just, for the record, explain whether or not they have been approved by Ledge Council, just so we know for the record whether they are, and then we can proceed as we go through. Thank you.
Well, I'll certainly leave the legal minds debate this back and forth a bit, but I'll recognize the honourable member for Richmond on those 2 points.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe there was some discussion with Legislative Council, but in fact it was our own legal counsel in Liberal caucus that did prepare these for us. And Well, you know, we actually do have members from the Bar Society in our employ, Honourable Leader of the NDP, and I'm sure as a fellow member from the Bar, you'll show your utmost respect to any other fellow members of the Bar as per our own code of conduct. So with that, Mr. Chair, they were drafted by our own legal counsel, and it's my understanding that the under clause 3A, subsection 1, sub A, after December 2003, rather than the word or, it should be stricken to say and prior to the amendment that we have tabled here, just for the clarity of the House Leader of the NDP. But before prolonging this discussion, Mr. Chair, I should point out to members of the House that we did bring this amendment forward at the law amendment stage, and at that point it was clear that the members of the NDP caucus and Conservative caucus both voted against the amendment at this time. So I'm not sure if this is an exercise of wanting to get down in the exact wording only to watch both caucuses once again vote against it. But clearly what this amendment is aimed to do, Mr. Chair, is to provide Nova Scotians with a better opportunity to assess Sunday shopping, its merits, maybe the negative side of it, what impact it would have on the economy, on the job market, and for Nova Scotians to be better informed when asked to vote on this issue come the October municipal election. To simply say the 6 weeks before Christmas, we know that's an extremely busy time of the year as it is. Speaker, let's listen to the Tourism Association of Nova Scotia. Let's listen to shop owners who are saying, let's try it during the summer months when we have the cruise ships coming in, when it's our busiest tourism season. Let's see what impact it's going to have then, and then let's decide, is this an experiment we want to continue it? Do we want to go year-round? Do we only want to limit it before Christmas, or do we not want it at all? But let's give Nova Scotians an appropriate opportunity. What this amendment would do, Mr. Chair, we already have in the bill where stores would be open from the 16th of November of this year to the 21st day of December of this year. We are proposing that we have a second trial period, which would be from the 2nd day of May of next year to the 26th of September of next year. We believe that is your busiest tourism season here in the province. That would be a better reflection of what impact Sunday shopping would have during that period, and as a result of that, Nova Scotians would be better informed when they go vote on this issue come October 1st. And I would so move the clause with the noted changes that I have already indicated.
Okay, the question is before the committee on the proposed amendment by the member for Richmond. All of those in favor say aye. Contrary minded? Nay. It looks like the motion is defeated. Shall clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall clause 2 carry? Carry. Clause 3 carry? Carry. Clause 4 carry? Carry. Clause 5 carry? As amended, of course, right? Shall clause 6 carry? Carry. As amended. Shall clause 7 as amended carry? Carry. Shall clause 8 oh, no. I recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is our second amendment.
Could we ask one of the pages to circulate that amendment? Start off with the government House Leader, if you would, and the leader of the House Leader for the NDP. Thanks. Well, if the honourable member for Cold Harbour Eastern Passage could just bear with ourselves and Legislative Council for a moment, just to make sure that the motion is in order. I believe we'll have to rule that particular amendment out of order. It doesn't fit with the act as prescribed. It comes more in under the Labour Code. Perhaps if the honourable member for Richmond would like to provide some further clarification. Order, please. Order. Perhaps we'll take a 5-minute recess and 5 minutes exactly. 5 minutes. Okay, we call the committee back to order, please. I now recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and based on discussions with the Legislative Council, the amendment should read, it would be to add a new clause 13, and added to that clause would be that subsection 66, subsection 2 of chapter 246, and number 246 should be added in there, as enacted by chapter 14 of the Acts of 1991, is amended by striking out quote 24, end quote, in the fourth line, substituting quote 36, end quote, and then to renumber the rest of the bill as a result of the changes. Basically, Mr. Chair, what this...
Yes.
Sorry.
Honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Clause number 8, I understand the amendment is to clause 13. And it would be, I'm not sure if, I heard him speak about it, I wasn't sure how much substantive change there is to it, but obviously we should wait until clause 13, but also if there is some substantive changes, even if it's handwritten, so we could have a copy of it, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, the honourable member for Richmond is presently offering to pass a copy to the member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage. That's right. It is now 13. Breakdown of communications between the member and Legislative Council and myself will now, for all intentional purposes, we'll call for 8. 8. Yes, we're on 8. Okay, so clause 8 as amended. Yes. Yeah, clause 8 as amended. Gary? Clause 9 as amended. Right, clarification on that? Clause 9 as amended. Clause 10 as amended. Clause 11 as amended. Clause 12. Clause 13. Oh, I recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Speaker. And the confusion was with the renumbered bill as to the original bill. Basically, this would add a new clause 13, replace the existing one, which would then be bumped down to number 14, and the rest of them renumbered accordingly. But again, this is the section that would amend the Labour Standards Code to ensure that someone who has worked 7 consecutive days would be provided with at least 36 hours of time off rather than the current 24. Now, Mr. Chair, I'm sure you'll appreciate that if we are bringing in Sunday shopping, that it's important that we make sure that working families do have an appropriate amount of time off to spend with their families. And I know that, as was pointed out by our leader, the House Leader of the NDP wanted as much as 48 hours off, which it's my understanding that there was some concern about that. And so we've brought forward here what I believe is a reasonable amendment to that, which would move it to 36 hours. So I think this is, if we're going with Sunday shopping, this amendment actually has to do with Sunday shopping and can be tied directly to it. And as a result of that, I would move that the House put this amendment in, which will certainly be something that will help Nova Scotia families, Nova Scotia working families, especially those where one or more of the families will be required to work on Sundays as a result of these changes, and I so move.
On the amendment as proposed by the member for Richmond, all those in favor? All those in favor say aye. And contrary minded, we're asked for a recorded vote. Shall we call the vote now? Are the whip satisfied? Satisfied? Five minutes? Is that agreeable? Whips for the Liberal caucus? 5 minutes, NDP? 5? How long do we have? Are we going to go up to the hour, or are we going to? Let's make it 10 minutes. 10 minutes? So we'll return at 5:54. Order. Order, please. Are the whips satisfied? Okay, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll call.
Mr. Clark.
No.
Mr. Morse.
No.
Mr. Rodney McDonald.
Absent.
Mr. Russell.
No.
Mr. Ham.
Absent.
Mr. Baker.
No.
Mr. Muir.
No.
Mr. Christie.
No.
Mr. Fage.
No.
Mr. McIsaac.
No.
Ms. Bolivar Gibson.
No.
Mr. D'Entremont.
No.
Mr. Hurlbert.
Absent.
Mr. Barnett.
No.
Mr. Morash.
No.
Mr. Taylor.
Nay.
Mr. Dux.
No. Mr. DeWolf.
Mr. DeWolf, sorry.
No.
No.
Mr. Dux.
No.
Mr. Chisholm.
No.
Mr. Langell.
No.
Mr. Hines.
No.
Mr. O'Donnell.
No.
Mr. Chataway.
No.
Mr. Parent.
No.
Ms. Massey.
No.
Mr. McDonnell.
No.
Mr. Corbett.
No.
Ms. Maureen McDonald. Mr. Dexter.
No.
Mr. DeVoe.
No.
Mr. Manning McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Graham.
Yes.
Ms. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Gaudette.
We.
Mr. Glavine.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell. Mr. H. Dave Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Sampson.
We.
Mr. Steele.
No.
Ms. Moore.
No.
Mr. Parker.
No.
Ms. Raymond.
No.
Mr. Epstein.
Nay.
Mr. Pye.
Absent.
Mr. Goss.
No.
Mr. David Allen Wilson.
No.
Mr. Estabrooks.
Nay.
Mr. Sampson.
Yes.
Mr. Theriault.
Yes.
Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
Order, please. The clerk.
Those in support of the motion 10, those opposed 34.
The motion has been defeated. Shall clause 13 carry? Shall clause 14 carry? Shall clause, well, that's it. Shall the, shall all the clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? First, yeah, should we do the signature first? I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee to now rise and report this bill.
Okay, committee rises. All those in favor? Aye. Motion's carried.
Chairman of the Committee on the Whole House and Bills reports.
Committee has met, considered one bill, Bill 2, and the chairman's been instructed to recommend it to favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Is it agreed? Agreed. Order this bill be read a third time at a future date. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Please call Bill number 26, the Health Protection Act.
Bill number 26, the Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this bill be now read a second time, and I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to present this bill to the legislature. Mr. Speaker, earlier this month, a report was released on the renewal of public health in Canada in light of what was learned from SARS. In the report, Dr. Naylor and his colleagues urged all provinces and territories to take action to ensure that their health protection legislation provides the tools they need to handle infectious disease outbreaks, while at the same time respecting rights to privacy and civil liberties. Now is the time for us to take action in Nova Scotia. In the face of new and highly contagious diseases such as SARS, the current legislation is no longer adequate. Nova Scotians need to know that the people protecting them have the legislative tools they need to manage and contain whatever Mother Nature throws our way. This legislation was created after careful review of